In this episode, we discuss a recent case heard by the Delhi High Court concerning the inheritance of cryogenically preserved sperm. We also talk about the rescue of two mountaineers who were stranded for over 60 harrowing hours in extreme weather conditions without access to essential supplies. But first, we talk about a robbery that has sparked a political slugfest and reignited the Thakur versus Yadav debate in UP. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. On the 28th of August, a group of armed men robbed a jewelry store in Sultanpur, a small town in eastern UP. When we spoke to Indian Express's Asad Rehman, he told us that the store was located in the Thateri Bazaar.
If you look at it from outside, you'd think that it's not a big shop, but after the details of the robbery came out, actually they have a lot of gold and silver stored in their shop. And they deal with bigger clients who come from small towns but are big players in their villages. So they deal, in a way you can say that they're like a wholesale sort of shop for jewelry, where a lot of smaller jewelers come and take their silver, their gold, their ornaments from that shop.
He says the shop isn't flashy. It's the kind of place where everyone sits on the floor while dealing with the jewelry. Now, the market where the store is located witnesses a lot of heavy traffic. So the robbers chose motorbikes instead of cars to make their getaway.
And then they had an SUV car which was stationed around 1 kilometer from the shop. And they were supposed to reach that SUV and then abandon their bikes over there. Now, the motorcycles, all three of them that were used, were all stolen motorcycles. So none of them were not registered in any of these people's names. So what their plan was that because these stolen motorcycles are going to be used for the crime, the police is not going to be able to track them down through the motorcycle registration details.
At 12:41 p.m. that day, 5 robbers entered the shop, wearing helmet and scarves over their faces and armed with pistols.
And they hold all 5 people present at the shop on gunpoint. They beat up one of the customers who was trying to move around or who, as per the shopkeeper, was being a little fidgety. So they beat that person up and they threatened to kill all of them. And the shopkeeper told us that, that the idea behind letting them take everything was that they wanted to live. And that because the pistol on their head, gun to their head, they couldn't think of anything but to give them whatever was in the shop.
The robbers expected to find 30 to 40 lakh rupees worth of cash and jewelry. But the shop was carrying a much higher amount. They ended up looting a total of 1.5 crore rupees.
So they got so much silver that they put it in a duffel bag. They couldn't lift it. It was so heavy. So they had to drag it. They put it on their motorcycles and they fled. Now, one very interesting thing that happened at this point was that they also snatched a pouch which had some jewelry from one of the customers.
Now, while escaping, they accidentally dropped this pouch close to the shop, which helped the police narrow down their escape route. Eventually, when the police began looking at criminals with similar past offences, they identified Vipin Singh and Vinay Shukla. But when the authorities tried to locate these two, they discovered that they were absconding.
So once they realized that these two were absconding, they figured that they might be involved in this robbery. Now that is where the police investigation started. Really, the pieces started to fit. The puzzle started to fit that these two are the main people and that they've hired a new gang and they put together some old faces and some new faces and that they've done this robbery and that they have to be caught.
He says that both men have extensive criminal records, with at least 30 cases filed against each of them.
And their modus operandi or the method is that they generally recruit young men from disadvantaged backgrounds and they recruit them, they show them the dream of a better life and they tell them that we're going to rob a place. Initially, last year, there was a robbery in Surat and the same two masterminds were behind that also and the police had arrested 5 people and they were later released on bail in May this year. And after they were released is when Vinay Shukla and Vipin Singh, both of them are from Eastern UP, and they started planning this new robbery, which was going to be a bigger robbery and which was going to get them a bigger loot this time.
But a bigger loot required a much larger group. and so they assembled a gang of 14 individuals. Now, so far, the police have managed to arrest 9 of them. And this was made possible after Vipin Singh surrendered in court for an entirely different case.
Now, the police told the court that this man has surrendered, but we need his custody to question him in other cases. So August 28, this robbery happens. August 29, he surrenders. And that is when subsequently they started arresting other people, other gang members, because Vipin Singh was with the police in their custody and he started talking. And that is where they arrested 4 more people within a week. And then a couple of weeks later, they arrested one man who's just 22 years old, Mangesh Yadav. He's from Jaunpur.
Now, this is where the story took a political turn. Because shortly after Mangesh Yadav was arrested, he was killed in a police encounter.
Now, once Mangesh Yadav was killed in an encounter, the Samajwadi Party, which is the principal opposition party in Uttar Pradesh, started questioning why a Yadav was killed and not the other accused, who also, some of them come from upper caste communities, some of them. And the Yadav versus Thakur debate in UP has been ongoing for a while, since at least Yogi Adityanath came to power. Now, the Samajwadi Party has repeatedly accused the Yogi Adityanath-led government of being favorable towards the Thakurs and going after the Yadavs.
He says the Yadav community is a core vote bank for the Samajwadi Party, while the Thakurs are a key vote base for the BJP.
Because the only person to be killed in this case was a Yadav, the Samajwadi took it on, saying that the Yogi Adityanath-led BJP government in UP is biased against the Yadavs and that they have not done anything against the other accused, which come from Brahmin community, Thakur community, 1 Dalit, 2 Muslims, and a few upper caste men also. So that is where the narrative changed. And, the Samajwadi Party started talking about it being the Mangesh Yadav being killed because of his caste credentials.
Now, a week after Yadav's death, another gang member was killed in a police encounter. But this time, it was a man called Anuj Pratap Singh, who belonged to the Thakur community.
The opposition then started saying that this is being done because the BJP government in UP wants to show that they are not against Yadavs. And Anuj Pratap Singh, who was also an accused in the robbery, his father accused Akhilesh Yadav of being the reason for his son's encounter, and saying that now his wish has been fulfilled now that a Thakur has been killed in an encounter just like a Yadav was. That is where the Thakur versus Yadav debate took on even more. And the Congress party also said that the Thakur boy has been killed because the BJP government wanted to put across the message that they are not taking these actions in terms of encounters based on caste and that the Yadavs are not being targeted. Because the Yadavs are an important vote bank for both parties. Might not be as important for the BJP, but they don't want to completely alienate them or isolate them.
He says the day after Anuj Pratap Singh was killed, the local police released a statement insisting that these encounters had nothing to do with caste and that their actions were entirely unbiased.
Now, there are still 3 men who are absconding in the case. Their families are completely in shock and they're scared that the men who are still absconding are going to be killed in encounters like the other 2. Now, we visited the families of the 2 accused who've been killed, Anuj Pratap Singh Thakur and Mangesh Yadav. Both families have consistent views in terms of that, their son shouldn't have been killed in an encounter and that they should have faced trial in courts and that this extrajudicial justice that is being done by the police is wrong. The police, on the other hand, defends itself and the government does too, saying that this action is taken only when the accused or the suspects or those who are being arrested resist their arrest and try to attack the police team arresting them, and that it is done in self-defense by the policeman.
And next we talk about why a hospital in Delhi was reluctant to hand over a dead man's frozen sperm to his parents and how that led to a landmark judgment in reproductive rights. The case dates back to 2020, when a 30-year-old man named Preetinder Singh was diagnosed with cancer. Upon hearing the news, the family opted to begin chemotherapy immediately. But before starting the process, the doctors cautioned Preet that the chemo could impact his fertility.
Which then led him to take this decision where he decided that he wants his semen sample to be cryopreserved.
That's Indian Express's Sohini Ghosh.
And within 5 days, his chemo was about to start. So right before that, his sperm samples were taken and it was frozen.
But Sohini tells us that within a span of 3 months, Preet, who had been his parents' only son, passed away. Now, a few months after that, his parents approached the hospital,
which was Gangaram Hospital. That's where he was treated for his cancer, as well as the semen preservation was also done there. So his parents in their 60s, they made a request to the hospital then for release of the preserved sperm sample. And back then the hospital said that while there are guidelines on what to do with, say, preserved reproductive material, be it an egg or a sperm, when it comes to couples, but there is no guideline on what to do with it in case a person is single. So this Preetinder Singh was unmarried and he did not even otherwise have a partner.
So wait, you're saying that there were guidelines for what should be done with an egg or a sperm if you're married, but there had been no guidelines regarding what a hospital should do if a person is single?
Correct. Because obviously when we think about reproduction, we think of it in the Indian context in the very traditional way, which is there is a marriage and then there's a spouse, and the spouse basically has some rights over. In such cases where, say, someone has died, passed away, the spouse has some rights over those reproductive material. But in case you're single, in case you don't have a partner, what to do? And since the hospital wanted to err on the side of caution, so they denied it. But at the same time, they told the parents that you get a court order and we will release it. Like, we don't have any personal interest in this. So we just want to err on the side of caution when it comes to the law. And that is when, so this happened in December 2020. And his parents then moved the Delhi High Court in 2021 with this very specific request that they want the frozen sperm sample to be released to them.
Okay, so tell us, what did the High Court do in this case? What precedent, what reasoning did they look at to arrive at a judgment?
So, firstly, there were some very interesting arguments made from the parents' side. So, in a way, they tried to establish that, number one, and of course, they were relying a lot on foreign law. So they relied on judgments from New York, from California, from British Columbia, from New South Wales, from Australia, because those countries have had some sort of jurisprudence in this area. So for example, there's this Supreme Court of the state of New York's judgment that they heavily relied on, where the son of a couple had died and the son's genetic material was basically permitted to be handed over to the parents by the court. So these were some of the foreign jurisdiction laws, jurisprudence rather, not laws, that the petitioners relied on. So what they tried to establish was that the genetic material or the reproductive material firstly constitutes a property or an estate of an individual.
Oh, so if a sperm in this case is treated as property, then they can talk about who gets to inherit it.
Correct. And once that is established, then you can bring in your inheritance laws to lay claim over it, which is what the parents did. They basically argued that the Hindu Succession Act deems parents to be the inheritors of a certain class 1 legal heirs, basically. And thus, if you are considering this to be a property of, say, the deceased person, then it's a possession. It's like leaving a bed or a house once you die. Who lays claim on that property? And how is it to be decided? So something similar was done here, and these are arguments that found favor with the court. Justice Pratibha Singh, who was presiding over the matter, and she ultimately basically ruled that indeed the genetic material can be considered as a property or an estate of an individual, And relying on the Hindu Succession Act, the court ruled that the parents are entitled to the release of this property, which is the son's cryopreserved sperm sample. And obviously the petitioners also had to establish their bona fide that they will be using this material purely for progeny purposes and nothing of commercial nature or anything along those lines.
As in for surrogacy purposes, to sell the sperm to someone else, for example.
Correct. Like, you won't be using that material to, monetize it, where you proliferate and continue using that sperm sample and earn a profit from it or anything along those lines. And their main argument was, it was kind of an emotional argument that, we have lost our son. So this would be the next best replica of our son. So this was basically what the arguments were. And the court then ruled in favor. And the court also looked at the rules and the existing laws when it comes to surrogacy, when it comes to your artificial reproductive technologies, ART Act. And based on it, the court deduced that since the law or the rules don't explicitly prohibit posthumous reproduction, so if it does not explicitly prohibit, you can draw a conclusion that there is no prohibition against posthumous reproduction. Otherwise, it would have mentioned in clear-cut terms that the act does not allow for posthumous reproduction. So this was you can say, a very clever way to look at the act, where you saw a gap and you kind of interpreted the law there, which is what happened here. So ultimately, the court held that there is no prohibition against posthumous reproduction.
Right. So this case establishes that a sperm or an egg in such cases are to be treated as properties. Could you talk about the implications of this?
So if this becomes a precedent, it also raises question on how the inheritance laws then work, and the ambit of it, applying it, becomes bigger. So does it remain restricted only to the parents of the deceased? Do the siblings have some right? What happens when the siblings and the parents are in conflict? Whose right is, more important here? Who gets a say? How do they get a say? So those things will, I guess, it will get refined over time. But this is in a way a very landmark judgment in that way, because it opens the door for a lot of things here on.
And in the end, we talk about two mountaineers, Faye Manners and Michelle Dovrak, who were rescued after spending more than 60 harrowing hours in extreme weather. When we spoke to Indian Express's Avaneesh Mishra, he told us about it.
So these two were part of a foreign expedition which was kind of supported by the IMF, which is the Indian Mountaineering Federation. And they left from Delhi on the 15th of this month, and they later started their expedition. And their plan was to reach this unclimbed region of Chaukhamba region, and the peak was called the Chaukhamba Third. And this peak was situated at a height of around 6,800 meters or something. And this has not ever been climbed before. And their plan was to climb this and be the first persons to reach this place.
He says that both of them are renowned mountaineers, with Faye Manners, originally from England, being the most experienced of the two.
And has a lot of experience in climbing several peaks across Europe. And last year she climbed a peak which was for the first time climbed, and that peak was in Pakistan. So yeah, I would say they are accustomed to such climbs, and that is why probably they were planning to reach this particular peak for the first time.
He says that last Thursday while climbing, they reached a rocky section of the mountain and were using a technique quite common in such situations,
which is trying to, first climb using the ropes, and after they reach a stable spot, they kind of pull their shared kit bag using a rope. But in this particular incident, after they reached a stable spot and they were pulling their bags using a rope, there was some rock fall, and because of the rocks falling from a height, one of those rocks kind of severed the rope, and because of that, their shared bag, which had crucial supplies such as food, tent, and other important climbing gears, that tumbled into a gorge, and because of that, they lost all the needed equipment. So they were neither able to, continue with their trekking, and nor they were able to, come back. And also they did not have their warm clothes with them. They did not have any proper food items with them. So they were kind of stranded at that place. And also they did not have any proper means of communication because their batteries died. And the only thing they could do was to manage an SOS call, which was, as per our information, sent to their embassy.
After the embassy was informed, they contacted the Indian Mountaineering Foundation, which then reached out to the district administration.
And while this particular thing happened around 3 p.m., around 4:30 p.m., they all came into motion, and they tried to find ways to reach them. And the state government and the district administration took the help of the Indian Air Force also. But because it was by that time, there was no sun and it was getting dark, the rescue operation started the next day. And 2 IAF helicopters, they starting, doing recce of the area. And in a post later, Faye and Michelle even mentioned that twice they saw these helicopters hovering around, but because they did not have any way to signal them, they did not have any flares or, smoke candles or anything else. So because of that, when they saw these helicopters first, doing a recce of the area and then leaving, they kind of lost hope.
Now, because of the high altitude, it was challenging for helicopters to reach them. Even after conducting a recon for more than 2 days, they were unable to locate them.
However, what exactly happened is that there was a French team in the area, the French team of mountaineers, and they were on another expedition. So the rescuers kind of contacted them and gave a possible location of these people based on the previous SOS call. And later these French mountaineers, they reached that spot. They kind of provided aid to them, provided food and shelter, and also shared their location. So what they did is to find a place where the chopper can land, and with the help of these French mountaineers, they reached that location where the IAF helicopters picked them up.
However, reflecting on the operation, Avaneesh tells us that many within the State Disaster Response Force, or SDRF, believed that the rescue could have been conducted more efficiently.
I mean, you have to realize that the rescue operation started the next day by the Indian Air Force helicopters, and the SDRF, they started trying to reach there through trekking on the ground after 2 days. So yeah, this could have been sooner, and those 2 women who were stranded there, they were kind of lucky that there was a French team in that area. If that was not the case, this rescue operation could have been much longer, and we cannot say if the rescue operation would have been successful also, because it is not easy for the SDRF people to, reach there and start this expedition without getting enough time to be acclimatized. The SDRF commandant, I talked to him, Arpan Yaduvanshi, and he said the same thing, that when a mountaineer goes there, they get enough time to get acclimatized to that height. But the SDRF people, they were going from Dehradun or Joshimath to suddenly to a much higher place, and that makes all the difference. So yeah, I would say that it was pure luck. I mean, initially it was a bad luck that this all happened, but also I would say that both Faye and Michelle were very lucky that there was a French team present in that particular area.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.